included. We are expecting Mr. Nasrawi to join us, but it appears he may be a bit delayed. So I think what I suggest is we'll go ahead and we'll get started so that people are, here and ready to listen, and we'll go ahead regardless. Okay. We will send the link to YouTube in the chat. We can do that. You are not expected to be on both if you're be on YouTube, so that you don't get one of those feedback echo loops, okay? But we can certainly do that to share. I will ask Abba to drop that into the chat box. Okay, it looks like we're live and connected. So good morning and welcome everybody to today's FAFS online seminar series. We're here under the webinar title, Looking Back, Looking Forward, Recurrent Crises and Resilience for Lebanon's Agri-Food Producers, Exporters, and Food Security. We are here today. We have a panel of speakers. We have speakers from AUB who are going to be leading us into this topic to explore what has happened in the past and what we can understand and learn for a possibly turbulent future. We do have a bit of a focus on today's speakers drawn from the private sector and academia, who also have a focus on fruits and vegetables. So there's a bit of a subsector focus there as well today. Briefly to let you know where we are, my name is Rachel Vaughn. I act as coordinator of our food security program here at FAFS. We have with us several speakers who will provide introductory remarks. First, we have a welcome and introduction from our dean, Rabi Mohtar. Then we're going to have interventions from two of our academic colleagues. Professor Rami Zurayk is a professor of ecosystem management, and he's also the chair of the Food Security Program Executive Committee here at FAFS. He'll speak a bit about persistent shocks and the resilience of food systems. Then we have Associate Professor and Coordinator of the Agribusiness Program, Dr. Ali Shalat, who will speak a bit about the current state of Lebanese agribusiness. After those introductory remarks, we will move to our panel discussion, and we're very pleased to have with us today 4 panelists drawn from outside of AUB. We have with us Dr. Kenj Hamedi, who is an assistant professor of agricultural economics and rural development at Lebanese University, who's speaking more about agri-food production and competition throughout crisis. We have Mr. Khalid Sino, owner of Kerma Lebanon SAL, who will speak about export access and competitiveness, particularly vis-a-vis the GCC. And we have Ms. Nadine Khouri, Chief Operating Officer of Robinson Agri, to speak about input supply throughout shocks. Our 4th speaker was added, we apologize, he was added a bit late, and so it was not possible to include him on the poster that went out, but it's a bonus for everyone joining us today. Mr. George Nastawi is the CEO of Al Rabia Sonacol Holding, so coming from the private sector and the food manufacturing segment. What we plan to do is have our introductory remarks from our 3 speakers. Then I'll give a more complete introduction to our panel. We'll have panel discussion. Each one will provide a 5 to 7 minute intervention, and then we'll have time for moderated Q&A. If you're joining us on WebEx, you can submit your questions via the chat box. If you're joining us via YouTube, you can submit a question via the comments tab. Please make sure that if you have a question for a specific person, kindly indicate who that person is. So with that, I suggest that we kick off, and I will hand over the virtual podium to Dean Rabi Mohtar.
Good morning, and thank you, Rachel. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. I would be very brief, but I'd like to highlight the importance and the timely for this topic and discussion. One, it really would be remiss to mention the economic crash and the importance of the economic crash to the context of this session and the discussion in order to establish a different alternative model for a sustainable economic model for the country. The second is that the geopolitical situation that we live in, remember that Lebanon is an exporting country when it comes to the food and agriculture system that constitute about roughly 17% today, but it has over the last 10 years ranged between 15, and it peaked at 25% of the total export back in 2017. So those are 2 issues that we cannot ignore as we explore this very important topic and looking at the panelists and the rich of experience that they have. I also would like to raise the bar for us as a sector. And I think whatever we do, we need to keep 2 boundaries in our mind. The first is that the export is important for the economic prosperity of the country. It's the only, I would say, one of the few elements to bring in fresh dollars, there, as they say, to the country. But let's not forget that we also have another responsibility towards the food security, and providing access to food for the domestic, for the locals, is very important, especially that fresh dollars are becoming scarce. And the prices in the market, if you go, all of us are going to the market to shop, the prices has been multiplied by 4 times at least. So whatever we do, we have to keep a balance between the economic prosperity, the export, and as well as the food security, the way we define it. And in here, I'd like to pinpoint a few things that may be familiar to many of you, maybe not, maybe less familiar to some, that despite the lack of government support and despite the lack of policies that protect our agriculture sector, the sector is really has been surviving at a I would say, despite all odds. We are very competitive. The Lebanese export and Lebanese produce has been very competitive as compared to many of our well-subsidized, well-invested in sectors in the region. I would specify, for example, we are very competitive in main produce of tomatoes, of avocados, of the citrus, of some of the apples and grapes. We're very competitive. And despite the fact that our farmers are not provided with incentives, have not been provided with technical assistance, but yet they have been competitive on the regional market as compared to larger economies such as Egypt, such as our neighbors in the south. So despite all of that, our farmers have been very competitive, and I think they really need some incentives. Way forward, I look forward to hearing from all of you. All of us are really looking forward to the insights that you provide. But I'd like to build on a couple reports that recently has been under study, and in particular, the McKinsey report. The McKinsey report highlighted several things I think we need to really to stop at. I would say first, it's the beginning of a planning. It's not the end of the planning, and I'll explain what I mean there. So the McKinsey report identified value chains that are of economic value to the country, in particular to the export. It has also identified some of the gaps and some of the way forward in terms of opportunities. But let me highlight an important element here, that this is only the beginning. What we really need to look at, and I would like to close with this in the opportunity, building on the McKinsey and other reports. One, we need to keep a balance between economic security and food security. And this is the export and the domestic supply chain that I think we need to highlight. The second is we need to look at nutritional security. We always, in fact, many of us in the agriculture sector, we seem to ignore that it's not, the food and agriculture system is not only about production, it's about producing the right things. Third, we need to look at the resource efficiency, resource productivity, and a very important nexus between water use, energy use, resource use in the production. Last but not least is of course, most of our, as I said again earlier, that because of the lack of the government support to some of these farmers and farming practices, new technologies need to be embedded. And I would say one of those that we've been working extensively with several of the national and regional partners, naming a few, the World Bank, FAO, ESCWA, and several of the universities in the region, including universities in public sector in Iraq and Jordan, the role of digital economy, the role of precision farming. And those are things that I would hope that these 4 elements we would build on and move forward. So thank you again. It's really a pleasure to have you all. I look forward to an engaging session and to learn together how do we learn about these opportunities from the private sector, and how can we build on what we know into competing and providing our people with the food security they deserve. So thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for your moderation, and the floor is back to you.
Thank you very much for those kickoff remarks. Next, we turn to Professor Rami Zurayk.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much, Rachel. And thank you, Dean Mohtar, for bringing in the issue that of the difference between production systems and food security. And in my very brief presentation, I have been allocated 5 minutes. I just want to make sure that this point is very clear to all of us, and that we start talking, we raise the issue of resilience. So let me start immediately by saying that this is a depiction of what the food system is. And it is complicated because it's a complex socio-ecological system. I'm not going to dwell too much on the theory. The reason I put it here is to show you that our food security, which is, if you follow my cursor, one of the different outcomes of the operation of this complex system is just that. It is an outcome. And that this system, like all systems, has inputs and outputs and has different subsystems and sub-subsystems, which are its components. It is, as Dean Mohtar likes to call it, a system of systems. And among these systems, these components, you have the food supply chain, and then the food supply chain is how food is produced. The food environment is where the consumer interfaces with food. The individual level filter, which include, for example, the knowledge of people about food, the ability of people to purchase food, and the consumer behavior, which are extremely personal to the consumer. All of these lead us to certain diets. These diets have outcomes. One of the outcomes is food and nutrition security, but other outcomes are social, the status of food workers, economic, whether this makes economic sense or not, and of course, environmental. What is the pressure that is exerted by this mammoth system in order to provide us with the food that we opt to eat? So complex issues, and what we're talking about today is essentially a subsystem of this subsystem of that particular component, which is a subsystem of food production and supply and input supply. And everyone in this virtual room works actually on this. Just so for us to look at how distant our food production system is from the output, which is food and nutrition security. And that in order to achieve it, we need to make sure that all of these subcomponents are in phase. Now, system resilience, well, you know, the issue of resilience is very discipline related. People who work in financial markets will talk to you about resilience, and people who work about communities will talk to you about resilience. People talk about food will talk to you about resilience. But in general, the meaning of resilience is refers to the capacity of a system to withstand or adapt to shocks, disturbances over time, so that it can continue fulfilling its function and providing services or the outcome that is desirable. In brief, the resilience of a system is the change in the capacity of a system to operate over time. And well, the shocks that we talk about in the Arab region here, and specifically in Lebanon, are actually quite well articulated. We know what they are. They can be climate-related shocks and natural disasters, such as droughts. We all know them. Macroeconomic distortions, we're very familiar of that. We can refer ourselves to the financial crisis of 2008, which led to a food crisis. There are also political pressures and conflicts. Today, in this is the region where you have the largest number of internally displaced people, the largest number as a region of countries that are mired in conflict, and of course, blockades and sanctions and all that comes with it. And of course, you also have the mother of all shocks that has been shaking us all in the past few years, which is the biophysical threats to human securities, and I refer here to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, how do these systems respond? What can we learn from the science of resilience? I have made a slide here that can sound complicated, but in fact is not that much. All of what we need to do, not all of what we need to do, is build into our systems, be they subsystems or super systems, resilience capacities. And these resilience, the capacities are what allows our system, in this particular case, our food systems, to withstand the pressures and bounce back and sometimes become even stronger, as we have seen in many countries. I can address that in the question and answer in the Q&A part. But here, as an example, so if you have your food system of a certain country, it has an output which is OX, it has built into it resilience capacities. One of the resilience capacities for countries that import are, for example, the diversity of import sources and import partners, but that is just used here as an example. When exposed to a shock, the outcomes will decline. Food security can be lost. It will decline until it reaches a certain threshold level, OT for threshold. At that moment, the resilience capacities kick in, and then the system can either fail, or it can revert to where it was, or it can actually improve, and its outcomes will be better than what you started with. And in this particular case, we shall call those systems antifragile systems, referring to the work of Nassim Taleb on chaos, complex systems, and anti-fragility. I hope that all of the information that you will present today can be placed by us and you jointly into a framework that helps us understand what are the resilience capacities and how can we make our food systems and our subsystems anti-fragile. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rami, for your welcome remarks and for that overview. That's very helpful to frame today's conversation. Next, we're going to turn to Professor Ali Shala from our Agribusiness Program to give a bit of an overview about the current state of Lebanese agribusiness before we move on to the interventions by our panelists. Ali, the floor is yours.
I just remembered I need to unmute, so just done that. Thank you, Rachel. I think my presentation is going to be a bit more pragmatic or geared to the short term than the fascinating introductions of Dean Mohtar and Professor Zurayk. And I've been entrusted with the task of overviewing the current state of Lebanese agribusiness. I would do it hopefully very briefly. And many of the key issues or statistics I'll be reviewing are known to many of you. So in a way, some of it is already known, but hopefully it will help better frame and contextualize the talks of our esteemed panelists. So just to give you a bit of background, agribusiness employs 11.5% of the workforce in Lebanon, if we're talking about narrowly defined agriculture-related activities, but up to 20 to 25% of the population is involved in one way or another in agriculture in some capacity. And domestic companies are involved throughout the value chain from all activities, from starting with agri-inputs to the production process itself, to processing and packaging, distribution and retail. Agriculture per se contributes 3.2% of GDP, that's in 2018, with top produced crops in Lebanon being potatoes and vegetables, of course. Key leaders in crop production in terms of vegetable productions are tomatoes and cucumbers. Of course, other crops are of note, fruits, apples, bananas, citrus fruits in general. And also, of course, wheat as part of known crop rotations in arable agriculture. The agri-food sector, on the other hand, was recently valued at 1.6 billion US dollars and registered a healthy growth somehow between the years 2010 and 2018, averaging an annual growth rate of 9.5%. And in Lebanon, this is actually a very healthy growth rate. And of course, it contributes another 2.5 to 3% of the GDP. And it's worth noting here that 18.2% of Lebanese industrial enterprises are related in one way or another to agri-food processing. So when we talk industry, a substantial proportion of it is composed of agri-food processing. If we reverse the picture, we realize that agri-food processing contributes up to 40% of industrial GDP. So we're moving out of agriculture. So the contribution of the agri-food sector goes beyond merely the farming sector to encompass also the very important agri-food industries and processing activities. Farming, the cornerstone of the agri-food sector, in terms of farming, farmers were already operating on the circumstances of high input costs and low output prices before the onset of the economic crisis that we are living through for more than a year now. And this crisis has, of course, exacerbated the situation, mainly by denying many farmers, especially small scale, but I mean, mostly all of them, but most hardly smaller scale farmers, by no longer making available to them the limited credit options that were available to them before the crisis. And when we talk about access of farmers to credit, this does not have to happen. This doesn't happen very often. It's not through the formal banking sector, but through purchases of inputs on credit from agri-input providers. Nowadays, because these providers themselves are under huge squeeze and have more and more limited credit facilities, they are basically pushing this their limited access to credit onto the shoulders of the farmers. So the farmers themselves have to pay in cash nowadays, and very often in fresh dollars rather than pay on credit, which was a leeway for farmers, especially highly indebted ones, to actually carry on doing what they were doing. So farmers have been forced to substitute as a result, because of the high cost of inputs. They have been forced to substitute inputs that have become harder to obtain. And overall, we're starting to see practices of using more biological soil amendments and fertilizers instead of synthetic fertilizers, saved seeds instead of imported seeds. So these activities are cropping up again under the effect of the crisis. The sustainable outcomes are self-evident, but the motivation for that is obviously not any preoccupation with ecological sustainability, but rather financial sustainability of the farming sector itself and of farmers themselves. So the sector has moved to a low input system overall, according to FAO sources. In terms of trade, not all news are bad news, at least as far as the agricultural sector is concerned. The first 8 months of 2020, according to statistics published by the bank, by the Audi Bank, have registered an increase in agricultural exports by 21 or almost 22% in terms of value. While imports, on the other hand, agri-inputs, agri-food inputs have dropped by 29 or 30%. So the agriculture and the agri-food sector has been notable in its ability to basically use the crisis as a way to grow rather than shrink, which is notable. Now, who are the main beneficiaries of this increase in export is still to be seen. That's something I'm personally interested in working on with my graduate students. And we're currently looking into the distribution of profits along the agri-food value chains that has arising from this alleged increase in exports. Meanwhile, industrial exports have decreased over the same period due to the difficulty of importing inputs. So not only industry, but all other sectors of the economy in aggregate have shrunk, which is something I found very interesting. In 2018, the top contributors to agricultural exports were fruits, making up 39% of agricultural exports, followed by vegetables, 20%, and coffee and spices, which are processed products, so agro-processed exports, making up almost 20% of our agri-food exports. So overall, there's a decreased demand for imports, which has created market opportunities for local producers, especially in terms of agro-processing, and especially in terms of manufacturing or processing agri-food products like chocolates, water, and of course, fruit and dairy production and processing. In terms of sector-wide challenges, of course, at the forefront is the paucity and the urgent need for agricultural support from the government, whereby the existing strategies themselves are very ambiguous and very untargeted. There's no conscious agricultural policy and decision to be that is operating at the level of the government. And actually, there's no policy at all. I mean, we're living in pretty much in a policy and political vacuum nowadays. So one of the first casualties is, of course, the agricultural sector. So which makes its ability to withstand the shock and at least respond, at least in terms of exports and perhaps in terms of production, all the more interesting and commendable. Capital flow to Lebanese agriculture is very low compared to capital flows in other sectors. This has always been the problems. And of course, in comparison with the MENA regional average, agriculture is very low. I mean, this has been a perennial problem in the Lebanese policy setting. Agribusiness receives less than 1% of the total credit is formal credit, while it contributes 5% of the GDP, combining both farming, agriculture per se, and agro-food industries. Which is, very out of proportion with the size of the contribution itself. The availability of funding options has been negatively affected by the crisis. This comes as no surprise, and agriculture in this is very untypical, is very typical of other agricultural sectors. And the private sector so the private sector at the time is fully functioning, but liquidity deprived. Which is a major problem operating in the sector. The insufficiency of food safety monitoring regimes also complicates any potential for exports. So our traditional export markets still exist, but any expansion in high value added markets, export markets like Europe, still awaits the establishment of rigorous food safety and quality monitoring standards, which are very fragmentary for the time being, to say the least. To end, in terms of opportunities, before the onset of the crisis, the advantages of that Lebanese agriculture presents in terms of servicing its own domestic economy and the export, and in terms of export activities that would guarantee badly needed foreign exchange, were, of course, well known for everyone. I repeat them: favorable climate, an availability of entrepreneurial talents in Lebanon compared to the surrounding countries, and also a relatively well-educated workforce. But more current interest is the potential increased competitiveness of local products in the local market, in satisfying local needs, but also in tapping into existing, expanding new export activities to existing markets, but also tapping into new export markets, high value added, high value export markets. But this, of course, awaits conscious and well-established support mechanisms instituted by the state, which are so far inexisting in the current vacuum that we are living in. And I'll stop at that. And I really look forward to the interventions of our panelists to actually enrich our insights further into the current state of fruit and vegetable sectors in Lebanon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ali, for the overview, challenges and bright spots for the sector. With that, we now turn from our introductory and overview remarks to our panelists. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce all four of our panelists who will be speaking one after the other. And then after that, we'll have our opportunity for Q&A. Today, our first panelist will be Khan Chamede, Assistant Professor of Agricultural Economics and Rural Development at the Lebanese University, Faculty of Agriculture. Using mixed methods research, his research interests focus on issues pertaining to social exclusion and vulnerable populations, rural and refugee livelihoods, market system dynamics, and sustainable local economic development. He also has expertise in design, evaluation, and impact assessments of development projects. Our second speaker will be Mr. Khaled Sinno. Mr. Sinno is owner and president of Karma Lebanon SAL, exporters of fresh fruits and vegetables. Mr. Sinno also serves as chairman of the FAFS External Board of Directors and Secretary General of the Harvard Business School alumni in Lebanon. Our third panelist will be Ms. Nadine El-Khouri, holder of a bachelor's degree in agriculture engineering from AUB. Ms. Khouri went to Holland for a one-year training in sustainable agriculture before she started working at Robinson Agri, a company founded by her father, Mr. Sami El-Khouri. She's ascended to the role of COO, directly contributing to the expansion of the greenhouse and seed businesses of Robinson Agri. Her focus on innovation has projected Khouri Group to the forefront of advancing agriculture in Lebanon, which is now branded as the only socially responsible agricultural company after the adoption of the SDGs. And moreover, she serves as a member of different professional associations, including acting as president of the QOOT cluster. She's an external board member at FAFS, and she is a member of the Association of Lebanese Industrialists. Our fourth speaker, our fourth panelist today is Mr. George Nasrawi. Mr. Nasrawi is a veteran industrialist from Tripoli and chairman of Sonoco Holding, specialized in the manufacture of food products for more than 4 decades. Mr. Nasrawi has a degree in business management and radio telecom. While starting his education, he simultaneously created the business of food manufacturing, and his company is operating all over the world under the renowned brand Al Rabi. Sonoco SARL hold an ISO 22000 certificate reflecting their company's emphasis on quality. Mr. Nasrawi is well known in the food business, where he contributes immensely to the industry and to public interest. For example, he acted as president of the Syndicate of Lebanese Food Industries from 2004 until 2013, and he's currently the vice president of the Association of Lebanese Industrialists. We're going to go round robin and allow each of our 4 panelists to speak in turn. One note, please, Mr. Nasrawi has indicated he prefers to speak in Arabic. So I apologize to any of our listeners who are not Arabophone. We will try and put a brief recap. We will try and make that available to you after his intervention, but we prefer to hear him speak as he prefers. With that, I will turn over to Professor Hamedi.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for the other speakers, also for the introduction. What I'm going to try to do in the next 5 minutes is to talk about the different shocks that were faced by the Lebanese agriculture since 2000, but also touch a little bit on some of the elements that reduce resilience capacity that were mentioned by Dr. Zurayk. We have significant structural issues prior to the Syrian crisis, for example, but also significant structural issues that date, we can say, to the creation of the country. So our agriculture suffered from 3, to name only a few, from 3 key elements that lead us to have to think differently in terms of the non-existence of an average farmer. The sector is highly informal. There is no proper definition of what is a farmer, what is an agricultural holding, what is an agricultural business in a way. Most Lebanese, 88% of Lebanese people working in the sector work informally. And obviously, all we can say easily that all Syrian and foreign labor working in the sector also for work informally. We also have a very heterogeneous and fragmented agricultural sector, in a way that you have a lot of large agribusiness, very efficient with access to resources and to finance, and you have in another way lots of very small producers with very lower capacity in terms of innovation or access to technology or access to finance and investments. Plus the fact that this, for example, you have 1% of Lebanese landowner who owns approximately a quarter, 25% of agricultural land. So very high concentration and capital accumulation in the hand of few. On the other hand, you have a sector in which association and cooperative and dynamics of mutual cooperation between farmers and small farmers remains relatively weak for several reasons. That leads us to a context where basically a lot of, sometimes during seminars or discussion, we have different perspective on the effects of different type of shocks and different perspective and different dynamics of response to specific shock, and we'll go through that differently, because in reality, there is no average farmer. There is no farmer in the middle. There are very, very large farmers that react differently and very, very small farmers that cope with the system in different manner. If you look, for example, to the trade liberalization shocks of the early 2000s, many have seen that as an opportunity, as a way to be able to export to Europe. And indeed, for example, we know that Lebanese agriculture, Lebanese table grapes are the ones that are sold to highest price in London and UK market in December and January. Why? Because some large companies were able to structure value chains that are competitive, to structure post-harvest systems that are competitive, and work with competitive medium and large farmers to be able to export. While at the same time, most of the farmers suffered from this trade liberalization, from the competition they could not follow, because they do not have capacity to access technology, they don't have capacity to access investment. And what they did is either choose to go toward lower value, lower input production, like, for example, olive oil that was increasingly coming in certain areas, or a secured system like tobacco, where you actually can buy, you know that you are ensuring, or wheat, where subsidies of the state ensuring buying production, or actually went into an unsustainable system of intensification that was supported by the peg to the lira, where basically with very low margin, giving very low margin, they opted for a very intensive mode of production with excessive use of input, and this excessive use of input allowed them for high yield, and in a way being able to keep making a profit, although this profit was limited by compensating by low margin, by large quantity and large input. This was possible because of the input supply pushing products towards the farmer, and the farmer capacity to buy it because of the peg and the strong Lebanese currency allowing it to get this kind of input. So either this small farmer went into unsustainable socially and also environmentally, and many farmers, landowners, have not opted for this mode of operation, and production was also possible for people who are landless farmers and were able to rent land, while people and landowners did not necessarily see farming as an option for their children and so on. So again, trade liberalization, and here there is many aspects to it, but we can say that different actors reacted differently. It's the same for the Syrian crisis. The Syrian crisis, you always have the dominant discourse in a way, or the mainstream discourse that we saw in much report, is that Syrian crisis had a negative impact, Syrian crisis closed the road, Syrian crisis reduced export, because this is the view also of one part of the agricultural sector, and here I'm not giving a value judgment, but one part of the agricultural sector that was living on export, and where the Syrian crisis did actually indeed impact its export capacity and its export abilities. But many, if you look at national accounts data, we saw that after the crisis, actually agricultural output increased by 10% in real value compared to pre-crisis levels. So where did this dynamics come from, and this dynamic of investment that was also possible thanks to the agricultural capacity to deal with this type of new investment and engage into small-scale farming investment, additional potato investment, additional investments in key area like the car area or Akar area, investments in greenhouse, which also here was supported by the PEG. And then the agriculture play a very important role in securing and stabilizing income for rural areas. Today, with the crisis and with the financial crisis, this is at risk. This is at risk. And again, this is at risk of having lots of people losing their income. And because I have 1 minute remaining, I will try to go fast. But the idea, again, like Dr. Sharat mentioned, the 28% of exports. So basically, again, we saw that there is a certain part of the sector that is acting, pushing for opportunity for export and increasing the ability of an agriculture that is directed to export, where we are not securing that they are going to get back their money to Lebanon. I mean, a lot of, if you ask trade finance officers, you will see that this money, when you export money, basically the people are asking the banks, pay me in my account in Cyprus, pay me in my account in Paris. Nobody is really exporting and getting back the money home. So again, the financial crisis is benefiting people who are able to export, and traders and large people are able to accumulate and export there. And while smaller farmers are in risk of serious impact. This is a real concern for rural areas in that regard and their capacity to sustain production. I will stop now because of the time issue, but one example of this export issue is the ban on olive oil export that was mentioned by the Ministry of Agriculture. To stop olive oil export because of the risk of increasing food prices locally.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your intervention and all the detail. We expect certainly some good questions during our Q&A. For the moment, though, we're going to shift to Mr. Khaled Sino for his intervention. Mr. Sino, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Rachel. I will talk basically about our experience to give you a very specific practical example of some of the ideas that were presented by Dr. Zurayk, Dr. Shala, and Dr. Hamedi. So in our case, we as exporters of fresh fruits and vegetables, have faced, since we started approximately 20 years ago, and and problems that affected the continuity of our business. I will mention some of them. Like armed conflicts in 1996, 2003, 2006. Political problems mainly related to the closure of the Syrian borders. In some cases, typically and historically, the Syrians have always used, the borders as a way to send messages, political messages. So all of a sudden they would close the borders. Sometimes they would triple, quadruple, decide to make it impossible, in terms of fees that you have to pay to pass through, etc. So that's one major hurdle. Other examples of problems include internal closures of routes internally in Lebanon due to civil strife, demonstrations, road blockages, etc. So then, in this case, it is difficult to move the product from point A to point B, where we have to package it and export it. Weather conditions have been also sometimes a major problem in terms of either hot or cold weather, okay, where we lost a lot of crops, and then we didn't have really much crops to export, or particular kind of crop in a certain season. Disease sometimes affects the crop. In a few years back, custard apple, ashta, was had a serious problem with a certain kind of disease that didn't have really a solution for it at the time. Lately, the kinds of problems that we are facing are related to some media reports that have been, publicized, on TV related to contamination of the water in Lebanon, or the use of certain illegal pesticides, etc. And some governments in the GCC became a lot more strict, in terms of accepting our product and requesting, a number of documentation, and phytosanitary reports in order to allow, and that will increase our cost tremendously. So in a nutshell, there are a number of continuous, recurring problems, and we have been, used to, we adapted ourselves to, immediate shocks, that happen without any warnings. So, effectively, the way our company has, typically or historically dealt with this. And, I would like to make a remark here is that the fact that, we grew, personally, I was going to university and school, high school and university during the war, and sometimes we had to study, in the underground shelters, and sometimes have to take, tests during bombing, rounds, etc. I think we grew up to be able to operate in extremely tense situations, and atypical situations. We became, this kind of molded in such a way that we are able to always think that it is normal, to have bombs around, to have problems around, and create immediate solutions and adapt into. So when we started business, we kind of came back to this, experience which we have reserved over the years and made a lot of use of it. Now, in our company, one of the major ways in which we build resilience is actually, and it's important to note that building capacity for resilience, etc., is not something you do after you face a problem. Is when the problem starts, you start devising solution. You have to start much earlier than this, and make use of stable moments where you kind of build the system. And one of the major pillars of the system, I would say, is building alliances. Building alliances in terms of those people that we work with, being transportation, people in the transport business, people in the technology business, people in the academia, people in marketing, consumers, clients, etc. In our case, we realized early on that transport is, very key part of building this kind of resilience and becoming competitive. So we entered into agreement with DHL, where we became practically the only partner in the private sector of fruits and vegetables, which DHL could ship for. And we made use of their 5,000 square meter capacity space in the airport, because 95% of our exports go through the airport, and we built refrigeration facilities and cooling facilities, of other operational ideas that help us move the product much quicker. We also build alliances with technology companies. In that respect, I would give one example is DuPont, and we worked with DuPont for the past 10 years on creating a cool supply chain by developing a certain synthetic fabric that we use to cover the products and isolate them from harsh temperature or temperature shocks when they travel from Lebanon to other countries, especially to the GCC. And we actually came up with an amazing product, that we are using now, and some, very few other suppliers, very few other competitors are using, as a matter of fact. The second pillar is being extremely consumer-centric, and by saying that, I mean that we have to look after the rights and benefits of the consumer, the end user of our product. And we tested that during 2006 when we were out of the market for about 3 or 4 months when the airport and the roads were closed. And what happened is that we were a little bit apprehensive that consumers might shift to other products, And because we, from the beginning, were extremely, taking care of the consumer and the end user, by providing an excellent product, by providing a value product, and by providing excellent packaging and prices, the consumers actually came back very quickly, and we really didn't lose any kind of market share during this, being away from the market. So being consumer centric was very helpful. Then we, since we started, we continue to find our business model that strives to take care of our employees first and foremost, make their well-being taken care of at all times. We offer the highest salaries in the market. We continue to develop training programs for them, and our suppliers as well. I mean, we pay them well, we pay them on time, and all this allows us to build this resilience capacity, because after all, I mean, if your employees are not, or the staff is not, feel logical security needed, they will not be unable to function under, extreme conditions. And the same applies for suppliers. I mean, they want their money fast. They want them, their accounts to be settled, on time, and the prices to be fair. So that makes the resilience, possible. Thirdly, optimize the resources. Continue to optimize the resources regardless of profitability, and never to settle down and relax. You have to continuously find ways to, make things in a more optimal way, And there is a misconception, and sometimes people mix between vertical integration and optimization, and that is a big myth, because it is probably anti-optimal to vertically integrate. In our case, we do not, go into agriculture ourselves. We let other people do it for us, and we don't transport anything ourselves. We let other people do it for us. We don't have any trucks. We don't have any farms that we run. And those just small examples of how we, strive to optimize the resources. Fourthly, continuously innovate in terms of the process and the product. That builds a lot of resilience. You have to be one step ahead of competition all the time by looking at the latest technological advancement in terms of packaging, in terms of shelf life extension, cool supply chain, continuous supply chain, etc. In essence, what you want to happen is that over time you create this very lightweight, flexible, compact company that is movable, thinks of itself as a solution provider, not as an export of fresh fruits and vegetables. And a case in point here, in 2006, we, on the verge of putting this company, folding it into a bag to Jordan, where we could operate the same model from Jordan, and it took us 15 days to put everything together, and then finally the airport opened. But building resilience is the ability to move the process. I mean, it is not something that has to do with geographical space. You have to always think of being able to provide a unique kind of service, a unique solution, and that solution can be provided from any place, in case you have to. And in that regard, I would say that resilience is the capacity to absorb a traumatic shock, but it is actually to spring out from it and look at it as an opportunity for advancement, because in this case you're building history, and from this history you learn so much, and this knowledge is accumulated and used. Okay. So I'm not.
I think we need to, if I can ask you to make your final statement.
Right. So final comment, I would say that in the GCC, currently there are no legal barriers of entry, of course. The latest challenge, which we have to think about carefully, is the Israeli attempt to penetrate those markets. In my opinion, it is not a major threat. It is one of the threats. We've seen, other countries, flood the GCC market with products. Iranian products are there, Turkish products are there, Chinese products are there. Dumping of European products has been commonplace since, the Russian embargo, EU embargo on Russia, etc. So it is another shock that we have to think of and confront, but it is not something that is existentially threatening. So I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steno, for those details and a company-level view of how resilience can be built. Our next panelist, we're going to turn to Ms. Nadine Foudi.
So, hello everyone. So I start by what Lebanese agriculture. I start by two major facts about Lebanese agriculture. First, material and the input are most of them. The private sector is really.
Ms. Houdi, because of the quality of the connection, can I ask if you can please turn off your video? We'll just go with the audio. Apologies for this. Ms. Houdi, can you hear us?
Are you listening?
Okay, we'll just go, we'll proceed without video. We'll retain the audio, please.
Okay, so start the fact about Lebanese agriculture is that all the raw materials and inputs used in agriculture are important. As the private sector is the only one investing, either development or selling on a credit basis. So the private sector was playing the role, and we were selling on 270 to 300 days credit base. So when the economic crisis occurred, we had many challenges to face. First, a lot of clients or growers didn't settle their account from previous years. And then we have also, we have to respect our commitment to national suppliers. The flow of COVID-19, we're adapting function. Logistics. Raquel, are you listening well?
I apologize. The quality of the audio has gone out again. We can ask you to try again. We heard about the non-payment from previous years. Ms. Houdi, can you hear us?
Possibly we can use the 3G, possible, Nadine, instead of the Wi-Fi, if you are on Wi-Fi.
No, I'm on 3G and I moved to my phone. So now it's better.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm sorry. So I will only just to mention that the Lebanese agriculture is facing many challenges. In summary, it is the input of the agri products. It is the selling on credit basis. It is the measure for the COVID-19, which were affecting the logistic and the transport, especially that we used to bring containers, for example, they used to take 1 month. They are taking 4 to 5 months due to the measures in the world. So on the short term, it was very difficult for us. But then on the long term, as private sector, we managed to make our pre-planning and our forecast in order not to have shortage. Lebanese agriculture is that we have two main seasons, the Bekaa season and the coastal area season. Didn't witness immediate shortage. prices were. When the coastal area season started, we found cash to purchase the necessary goods. So we could notice that they skipped already the summer season in cucumbers, and that's why it's level at the prices of vegetable crops. And the real challenge was because we as a private sector couldn't anymore give them credit. So because we moved to cash because we need fresh money to transfer money to our suppliers, because all the banks, we couldn't have access to our account, we couldn't have access to our credit at the banks, so we need fresh money, and we are selling now on a Lebanese lira rate at the illegal market. So this was a huge disruption for the farmers. The first fact is that we as Lebanese also, as growers, we have three types of growers. We have ones, we have the medium ones, and we have the large producers. So as small growers, they were supported by different NGOs called the Vulnerable One and by different social organizations. The larger producers who have access usually to technology and to some resources, our biggest problem is the agriculture activities or grown in the field. It was a huge, this has a huge effect on the consumer. Mentioned on the it has effect on the private sector because most of our turnover by minimum 40%, and it will have a huge effect on the consumer and on the healthy food basket because a lot the prices increased dramatically and we have a lot of shortage in some items. I always want to say that we should focus on thinking. I mentioned it before, this collection of the sector. We have Chemonix ARE, we have the project, the platform BL, and of course, food, first Agri-Food cluster in Lebanon.
Ms. Khouri, it seems we're still having connection issues.
Well,
Ms. Khouri, I think because of the connection issues, if we can ask you, if you can hear me, to just make your final summary statement to wrap up your remarks, and then we will move to our final panelist.
So I have to say this is the right time now to collaborate between a lot of projects coming.
Ms. Khouri, I'm sorry, I think we're still facing connection issues. I think what we'll do is we'll try and make your intervention available in an alternative format to the panelists, to the attendees. But if I can ask, I think we're going to close your intervention now because we cannot hear you properly. I apologize for that. Thank you very much for being here, and we regret sincerely that we can't hear your remarks properly. I'm going to turn now to our final panelist, Mr. Nasrawi. Mr. Nasrawi, I understand you prefer to speak in Arabic, and so we'll allow you the 7 minutes everyone else has had. If you can please go ahead and proceed For those listeners who are non-Arabophone, we will put a brief recap into the chat box and in the comments section in YouTube. Mr. Nasrawi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. شكرا للجميع وشكرا لدعوتي المشاركة معكم. أنا اللي لحد ما سمعت الزملاء في كثير من النقاط اللي طرحوها الزملاء بحب نوه. نحن قطاع الصناعة الغذائية بلبنان بعد الجهود اللي قامت فيها نقابة أصحاب الصناعات الغذائية اللي كنا من حوالي 20 سنة حتى اليوم بالمشاركة بالمعارض المتخصصة عالميا للتعريف على غذائنا اللبناني شرق أوسطي تحت شعار المطبخ اللبناني. كان لها أثر كبير هالدعاية اللي عملناها من خلال المعارض لزيادة صادراتنا. بدورة أثرت كتير بشكل إيجابي على المنتجات الزراعية اللي بناخدها وبنصنعها بمصانعنا من الخضار للفواكه للشتول حسب المواسم. هالشيء حتى سنة 2019 كان بحالة نمو وازدهار، بس وقت ابتدأت الأزمة الاقتصادية علينا بنهاية 2019 أثرت علينا على قطاع الصناعة الغذائية عامة، قطاع الصناعة عامة وخاصة المواد الغذائية. بدأت تتدنى صادراتنا من حيث عدة عوامل. كما دخلت علينا بعض المنافسة من الدول المجاورة مثل سوريا، الأردن، مصر، تركيا اللي عم بيقدروا ينافسونا بصادراتنا لأنه أكلاف إنتاجهم مدعومة من دولهم عم بتكلف بشكل أدنى من أسعارنا. نحن بس نرجع شوي للإعلان اللي عملناه عن المطبخ اللبناني بخلال هال20 سنة اللي مضوا بالمشاركة مع كتير دول ومستوردين بدول العالم. قدرنا أنه نعطي إيمج للبرودكت أوف ليبانون يكون شكله مميز. فاليوم بعدنا عم نحصد اللي زرعناه بهالسنوات السابقة أنه برودكت أوف ليبانون بعده مميز عن الدول الباقية، عم نقدر ناخد الأدد فاليو بقيمته شوي أكتر. من ناحية تانية أزمة خلقت معنا شوي أزمة المحروقات اللي مرقت من الفيول، لها كان كتير تأثير سلبي على بعض المصانع اللي بتصنع من ناحية مصانع الإزاز، مصانع البلاستيك، الكرتون، لبعض المصانع الباقية اللي بتستهلك الفيول كطاقة مكثفة بإنتاجها، وهيدي أثرت شوي كمان بتقلص الإنتاج. هلأ كلفة الإنتاج بلبنان مثل ما قلنا عم بتكون مرتفعة. عم نطالب دائما المسؤولين ودولتنا الكريمة بس بيسمعوا بدون تنفيذ. البادرة بالصناعة الغذائية عم بتقوم اليوم على بادرة فردية، وطبيعي بقدر ما عم نقدر نوسع وننشط هالقطاع بصادراتنا الغذائية عم نقدر بالمشاركة مع القطاع الزراعي نقدر ننمي أكثر وأكثر الإنتاج الزراعي. مع العلم عنا كتير مساحات بعدها فاضية بدها إرشاد زراعي أكثر تنقدر ننمي بعض المنتجات اللي بنستعملها بالصناعة الغذائية عم نستوردها نصير نقدر نستعملها لوكل. وخاصة هلأ هالبريود هيدي إنه ما بقى عم نقدر نحول تنجيب مستلزمات للصناعة كمواد أولية، بالإمكان كتير إنه نشجع وننمي قطاع الزراعة بلبنان يزرعوا لنا بدائل للمنتجات اللي بنستوردها. في عندي موضوع اللي هو موضوع دعم السلة الغذائية اللي الدولة عملتها وانعكاسها. بعض المنتجات اللي حطوها كدعم بالسلة الغذائية بنظري انه كتير كانت فاشلة، لانه اليوم السلة الغذائية او الدعم هو مخصص للعائلات اللي بحاجة لهالدعم، إنما إذا منحلل طريقة الدعم راح منها جزء كبير لعيال منا بحاجة إنه حدا يدعمها، بالعكس هي اللي لازم تشجع للدعم، وحطوا كتير منتجات فيها منا بحاجة إنه نقدر نمرقها كنا. فأنا كنت بإحدى الاجتماعات بمجلس الوزراء اللي حكيوا عن هالموضوع بداية بقصة السلة الغذائية، وعرضتها من البداية. كنت أنا عم طالب بقصة البطاقة التمويلية قبل ما نفوت بقصة السلة الغذائية. من السيئات اللي انعكست علينا كمان بقصة موضوع السلة الغذائية، اليوم بدل ما نعمل قوانين ننمي ونشجع صادراتنا تنفوت عملة صعبة، صار كل مصدر بده يصدر اليوم كونتينر مواد غذائية مضطر انه يطلع على وزارة الاقتصاد ياخذ موافقة مسبقة قبل ما نصدر. يعني عم نحط عراقيل بدل ما نهين تنقدر نزيد صادراتنا. هيدي كتير خلقت لنا كمان أزمة. بعد عدة اجتماعات بدأنا نسهلها شوي، إنما بعدها هالإجراءات عم تاخد وقت. يعني المصدر قبل ما يصدر بده يطلع على وزارة الاقتصاد ياخد موافقة، وإذا في بعض المنتجات كانت آخذة دعم بيمنعوه عن تصديرها. كما وأنه طلع في عنا قوانين كمان مجددا، وحتى حكي عنها من اللي هلأ طرحوا بعض المواضيع. قصة زيت الزيتون. زيت الزيتون كمان وزير الزراعة منع تصدير زيت الزيتون إلا بكمية قليلة، أو واحد بده يقدم بخلال 3 سنوات سابقة شو الكميات اللي كان يصدرها بيعطوه منها نسبة 70% يقدر يصدرها. نحن قدمنا اعتراض للوزارة تنلغي هالقرار، لأنه بالواقع كمان عم بيأثر على صادراتنا. أنا الموضوع اللي عم بشرحه هو مش كتير تقني مثل الزملاء عم يشرحوه تقنيا. أنا عم بشرح عن مواضيع، عن خبرة بصادراتنا، كيف بنقدر نعكس قوتنا بالصادرات تنقدر ننمي القطاع الزراعي بلبنان. بقى هيدي من الاشياء اللي حبيت اني احكيها عموميا، بينما في عنا العديد من الاشياء اللي بقت فينا نتوسع ونحكي فيها. في مثل ما قلنا المنتجات اللي فينا نزرعها بلبنان، هيدي في لها مجال كتير واسع اليوم نقدر نشتغل عليها. بضل في عنا كمان شغلة ما ننسى، التطبيع اللي انعمل من إسرائيل اليوم مع دول الخليج، اللي ابتدأ كمان يأثر سلبا على صادراتنا. وبنطلع كلنا عم نشوف بوسائل الإعلام المنتجات الزراعية كيف بلشت تغزي أسواق دبي. وهيدي كتير يعني مستر سنو من الأشخاص اللي بيصدروا المنتجات الزراعية، هيدي بتأثر كتير على صادراتنا. فلذلك لازم دولتنا، للأسف إنه ما عندنا دولة اليوم. نحن كجمعية صناعيين، أنا عم زور المسؤولين دايما عم نحكي بهالمواضيع، بس بدك هلا وزارة تكون فعالة. بنطلب بتسريع الوزارة لنقدر نفعل بعض القوانين ونحمي قطاعنا الزراعي والصناعة الغذائية تنقدر نزيد صادراتنا. كما وأنه الطالب المسؤولين وحضرتكم بما أنه أصحاب اختصاص ودكاترة بهالحقل، نقدر تكونوا مؤثرين على أنه دولتنا تخفف الإجراءات لبعض الصناعيين اللي عندهم أفاق طويل وخبرة طويلة بالتصدير، ما يحطوا لهم عوائق لنقدر نصدر ونزيد صادراتنا. اليوم البنوك كلنا بنعرف أنه ما عم تقدر تصدر، تفتح لنا اعتمادات نجيب مواد أولية. اللي قدرنا نعمله كجمعية صناعيين بالتنسيق مع وزارة الصناعة ومصرف لبنان، نقدر ناخد 100 مليون دولار من مصرياته الخاصة الواحد يفرجوا له عنهم المصارف تيقدر يستورد مواد أولية. ولليوم بعد في عنا صعوبة، مش كل المصارف شاركوا بهالبرنامج، جزء من المصارف اللي شارك فيه والإجراءات تبعها صعبة. كما وأنه عم نعمل بدائل كمان تنقدر نخلي استمرارية التصنيع ماشية. حكينا مع برنامج سمي سيدر أوكسيجين فاوند اللي مركزه بلوكسمبورغ، إدارته بباريس، له مكتب تمثيلي بلبنان. هذا الفاوند اللي رح ياخد هالمنصة رح تاخد دور بدل البنوك أو المصارف اللي كانت تأمل تمويل للصناعيين يقدروا يستوردوا المواد الأولية أو مكاناتهم لتطوير خطوط الإنتاج. هلأ قدرنا ننسق معهم، ابتدأنا فيها، ومصرف المركزي ساهم بهالمنصة بمبلغ 175 مليون دولار. الهدف منها يوصل تمويلها ل 750 مليون من بعض الموجودين بأوروبا لبنانيين أو غير شركاء يشاركوا بهالمشروع تنقدر نغذي وياخدوا بدائل من البنوك للصناعيين والتجار تنقدر نكفي خطنا بهالأزمة اللي نحن فيها. أنا هذا اللي
if you can please add your concluding statement. Thank you.
Thank you. شكرا لكم.
Do you need to add your final statement? Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists, and I apologize for the connection issues that particularly impacted Ms. Fouria. I'm sorry for that. For those of you who are listening along, but we're not able to understand Mr. Nasrawi, please keep your eyes on the chat box and on the comments tab. We'll put a quick recap in there in English for those who weren't able to follow along. We now have some time for questions, and we will include, we'll try and do our best. We, I think, can stay on for maybe a few more minutes than we have projected since we have such good material. I think what we want to do is ask each of our panelists the questions that come to you. If you can please answer, not more than 1 to 2 minutes so that we can make sure to address as many questions as possible. I'm going to ask, we have the first question for Professor Hamedi. Professor Hamedi, if you see it in the chat box, in your opinion, what are the products that have a real export opportunity for Lebanon's producers? If you could answer that briefly, please.
We have in the panel several exporters, either from fresh products or agro-industry. I think that maybe the question might be directed to them. In my opinion, I certainly know better. In my opinion, you have the standard fruit and vegetable fruits products that are traditional exports, apples, grapes, cherries, and avocado, with also the citrus, even if the citrus is lacking behind. You have potato, which is a strategic crop because it's an export crop and it's a food security crop. So it's at the same time a very specific crop that we should invest in and look at potential. As Mr. Nasrawi mentioned, in the agro-food, we have a wide range of traditional and innovative products based on Lebanese cuisine, and Mouni, which is a key exporter also in the sector. I think there is a lot of potential in this kind of products. I think they do actually, maybe if there is other product I missed, I think Mr. Sinno and Mr. Nasrawi can enlighten us on it.
Mr. Sinno, Mr. Nasrawi, do you have any more suggestions for competitive specific products for the person who posed the question?
جورج تحب تعلق على الموضوع ولا؟
نو تفضل خالد تفضل.
I would say that it's not what we, I mean, of course, yes. I mean, it is what we can produce the best, but it also has to do with the customer. What does the customer? Each market requires a certain kind of products. I mean, some of the products that we excel at may not be really interesting for a certain country or a certain export destination. I mean, for example, now we are working on developing the Ukrainian market. We have made several tests to Kiev, and particularly there is an opportunity during the cold weather months for us to export, a basket of fresh vegetables, and particularly greens. Those items are very interesting for the Ukrainian market and very much needed at this time. So it's not a matter of what you can produce, it's a matter of which market and what part of the year and what does this market require, and then how can you develop a working relationship with a potential partner in that market to be able to understand it better and respond to its needs properly. So it's not a simple question, because that question is always being asked, what is the most, what should we produce? I mean, what should we plant? I mean, what should we do? I mean, it's what is the strategy that we have? I mean, what kind of strategy do we have? And that will be an implication, it will be a byproduct of the strategy. I mean, if we decide to penetrate the Chinese market, then there are certain products that we have to produce to be able to penetrate that market. So it's a strategy, it's a focus, and traditionally we have been working, and exporting most of our crops to the GCC market, and that has been a very simple solution for us because that market didn't produce anything, neither in summer, nor in winter or anything else. So anything we dumped in that market worked. They bought it. And now times are changing. A lot of regional competitors are coming in, particularly Iran, Turkey, Egypt, Europe, and lately Israel. Israel will be a player. It is one of the players. I mean, it is not a major threat, like I said before. So it's a matter of understanding the market and responding to the needs of that particular market.
Thank you, Mr. Sinno. Mr. Nasrawi, if you'd like to respond, go ahead, please.
Thank you. شكرا لدكتور حمادي. كمان بحب بس نوه على شغله كأصحاب اختصاص حضرتكم تنوهوا عنا. نحن لبنان بالصناعة الغذائية مصدر لعدة دول، من جملتها أمريكا عندك ال FDA كتير بيشدوا على المنتجات وقت بتوصل لعندهم بالفحوصات المخبرية اللي بيعملوها. منها مؤخرا عم بيكتشفوا انه نسبة البستيسايد من بعض المزروعات عم بتكون كتير نسبة عالية وعم بيرفضوا البضاعة، وهذا بينعكس سلبا على صناعتنا. لازم يكون في توجيه للمزارعين بهالموضوع، كما وانه بالنسبة لموضوع الليطاني المياه تبعها اللي بيسقوا منها بالبقاع، هذه كمان عم بتأثر على نوعية المنتجات اللي بتطلع عنا. فبدها تقارير من الدكاترة المسؤولين تيكون في توجيه للمزارعين، نقدر نحسن بنوعية زراعتنا ونقدر نحسن بالماتيريال اللي بنستعملها كبستيسايد لمنتجاتنا الزراعية. أخيرا في شغلة كمان بحب ألفت عليها النظر، في الاتفاقيات التجارية اللي مدينا مع بعض الدول. نحن لبنان عم نستقبل وننفذ الاتفاقية التجارية بحرفيتها بلبنان، نستقبل المنتجات بدون أي عوائق، مع العلم وقت بنصدر لبعض الدول مثل التيسير العربية هالاتفاقية بيحطوا علينا كتير قيود. عم طالب المسؤولين دائما انه يكون التعامل بالمثل، يعني الدولة اللي بتشدد علينا نحن نشدد عليها. كمان هيدي ما في يعني أذان عم تصغي لنا، لأنه للأسف المسؤولين عنا الحكومة كل واحد همه بنفسه. يعني المرجع كله انه بدك الهرمية تكون الدولة تقدر تساعد هالقطاعات الإنتاجية. هذا اللي حبيت اني اضيفه وزيده. شكرا لك.
Thank you, Mr. Nasrawi. Our next question I'd like to direct to Ms. Khouri. Let's hope our internet connection is working again. Ms. Khouri, we have a question from the chat. You spoke about middle-sized producers who are facing perhaps the greatest challenge and difficulty. What kind of support do you think is most critical to direct to them?
Yes, the grower, especially the medium one, is the weakest point at the whole food value chain. So beside the financial support and the help from the different organizations and NGOs, I think we need to organize and control the wholesale market. He has to protect the grower, and which we should have an awareness from the consumer that they should trust the production of the farmer. They should really understand that the farmer is really working hard to bring a nice product, and it should be more awareness from ourselves, from the academia, about how to really eat local to local and to try to stop the smugglings and to protect them really to be able to continue. And as private sector, we have also to tell them how to shift from normal plantation, and as Khalid mentioned before, to see what can they really grow, and to compensate the lack of imports, like special herbs, like colored pepper, like more broccolis. So we have this market, and this is how we can help them. But especially, we need to support them from the financial part.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question to Professor Hamidi, building on some portion, you mentioned this issue of labor, who's working informally and how they're working. Lebanon's agricultural force, we know, draws heavily on foreign workers. And how have these workers been affected by the recurrent crises or their wages over the past year, if you have any information? Basically, what's the outlook for the agricultural labor force? And do you think the fresh fruits and vegetable sector can continue to rely on this cheap but hardworking foreign labor in the future?
I think there is a time perspective into that. There is, and it's a very short time perspective, medium and longer time perspective that we sometimes forgot to talk about. To my knowledge, till now, salaries or wages of Syrian workers haven't increased. They remained more or less at the pre-crisis level, pre-financial crisis level. They remain as low as 2,500 lira per hour in greenhouses and Akkar, and often also for women lower stage. We do rely on Syrian labor for our competitiveness. And part of it is the availability of Syrian laborers have refrained certain farmers to invest in technology, to invest in mechanization, because the availability of worker is still present. The question is, what are we going to do when the Syrian crisis is going to be over? What are we going to do when the Syria is going to be in a way reconstructed and most probably following a liberalization of the economy, and then we can see a shift of labor moving from Lebanon back to Syria because of if Syria goes to a liberal economy, we can expect similar wages in Syria as well. And here we're talking maybe about 2 years, maybe we're talking about 5 years, and maybe we're talking about 6 years, but this is going to happen at some point. And the question, how much can our agriculture, and it was part of the McKinsey report, maybe only one of the part that was, in my opinion, well looked at in the McKinsey report, is the importance of technology improvement, is the importance of improving competitiveness of medium-sized farmers, of family farm, and having family farming again an option for Lebanese families, because Syrian workers that are the basis of our competitiveness, that are the basis of what we eat, who produce our food, who produce our food products and vegetables and fruits, are going at some point to leave. And they are not going to stay within the dynamic of the Syria reconstruction. So how much can we in the meantime ensure better working conditions? Because the better working conditions are also important for local stabilities. We cannot have a sector that always rely on exploiting Syrian workers on the long term. It's not going to be sustainable. And I think people and input suppliers like Robinson and others who always have introduced some key new technology in irrigation and greenhouses also need to think in supporting introduction of technology that on the medium term may rely less on workers at some point. So it's a balance that we have to do between keeping the capacity of agriculture to absorb workforce, but then to also organize and plan a transition that is a smooth and easy transition toward a more modern form of technological production.
Thank you, Professor Hamidi. The next question, I'd like to start it off with Ms. Khouri, but I think it's the way it's been written, it can be addressed by multiple panelists. We see that this problem of the currency appreciation, the currency depreciation is increasing the cost of imported inputs. And it's been said that this can represent pressure to move agri-food producers to cut back on the improper or excessive use of them and shift towards more agro-ecological production techniques. Is that possible? Is it reasonable? We have another comment from the questions that builds on this. How can Lebanese farmers free themselves from the grip of pesticide companies that are destroying our health, environment, and agri-food sector and gain competitiveness with other more biological producers such as Israel and other nearby countries? Ms. Khouri, if you'd like to tackle that first, and then perhaps the others would like to chime in as well.
Yes. In fact, the limited financial resources are not incentive to adopt agroecological production techniques. We need a good training We need a good awareness on both producers and consumers. What is actually happening now in the market, because of the high price input, so farmers, some of the farmers are turning, on the contrary, to lower quality items, and thus increasing the risk of contamination and pollution. I don't want to sound negative, but this is really happening. But at the same time, we could see also some good farmers turning into technology, either by introducing hydroponic, NFT, or the cocoa peat. So this will reduce dramatically the use of pesticides, or either by introducing the grafting technique for vegetables also, which decrease the use of pesticides. But the problem, these are costly. So that's why we need the NGOs, we need the social organization to look really at the innovation part of the agriculture sector to be able to shift to the agri-ecological production.
Thank you. Would any of our other panelists like to comment on this issue? Go ahead, Professor Ahmed.
Yes, I wanted to follow up on the issue of labor, and the idea would be also to reorganize production and value added in a way that improved skills, improved technologies, and investment is done in the labor force and in the technology, instead of relying on a strategy that would only ask to invest and put a large part of the added value either with input suppliers and buying a lot of inputs, excessive use of input, or keeping, because of the lack of organization skill, keeping a large part of the added value with exporters and traders. And I don't have anything against both input supplier and exporters in the panel, but in a way, improvement of the agricultural sector will go through improving distribution of added value to go back to the farmers, to the farm levels, and to the work level, instead of relying, because our strategy was buy a lot of input and have a lot of production and give this lot of production to traders who will see how they distribute it based on the quality. When we can start implementing strategy which are improve the skills of your labor, improve the technology of production of your farm, improve your management purposes, and start building your own cooperative system of distribution and storage and grading, and invest at the farm level, at the production level, into workers' capacity and improve wages and skills of worker, and then furthermore, and then consequently wages and income at the farm level. I think it's time for us to try to look at the production side of medium farmers instead of and having them be able to take space, to take more added value at somehow the expenses in a way of input suppliers and traders, but at the benefit of the whole value chain in terms of efficiency on the long term.
Rachel, if I add please to Dr. Hamadi, that this is the right time for the university graduates, for the agriculture engineers to really come, for the youth to come and to take it over, because we need this innovation, and to introduce this new technology, we need the youth. That's the role in this.
Mr. Sindel, go ahead.
I would like to say that one of the major opportunities of the latest financial crisis that we have in Lebanon right now is that for the first time we are seeing the private sector coming into the agriculture sector, agriculture and agro-businesses, and seriously thinking of investing in this sector. And what this will lead to is the private sector works at a level of efficiency that is different from NGOs and the government and everybody. So this will eventually lead to the transfer of a lot of technological advancements, into the sector, which we can describe at the moment as primitive and not modern at all. So once we have the private sector coming in and investing, and now they clearly see the opportunity, this will lead to a transfer of technology, and this will mitigate one of the biggest potential shocks in the future. Because right now we always take for granted the availability of foreign Syrian workers in Lebanon, and relying on their very cheap, this kind of cheap labor as one of the leverages for the sector. But what if this resource is not available? What happens? And you know, the only way to mitigate this kind of traumatic possibility is by introducing a lot of technology that will reduce the effect of any kind of shock related to this matter. This is one part. I would like to add a small comment, which I missed in my small presentation, and it goes back to the idea of building resilience. And one of the most important things to do in that respect is to build financial reserves. You know, we are used to immediately distribute any profits in Lebanon, and I think building a war chest of financial reserves, you know, in Lebanon and outside Lebanon, and in different currencies and in different shapes and forms of liquidity, you know, this will help us, you know, survive and pay our workers and, you know, settle our commitments, you know, while we devise solutions to come out of any kind of traumatic shocks. So financial management and financial strategy should be part of this resilience ecosystem that we, each one of our companies should aspire to build, you know, over time.
Thank you, Mr. Sinno. I think Rami had his hand up. He wanted to comment on this in response to this question on agroecological. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rachel. You know, it just struck me that there are no farmer voices in our webinar. And I am volunteering to bring this voice, seeing that I am myself a medium-scale farmer, and that I have, you know, I grow avocado and ashta and pomegranate and olive on 12,000 square meters, and I have 20 dairy cows, and that therefore I am actually able to bring in this particular perspective. I have to say that one of the things, you know, we've been talking a lot in very positive terms about the private sector and its role and its innovation. But I have to tell you, you know, that my experience isn't that great as a farmer, you know, and that you will find this with many other farmers. I'm talking about input sellers. Even me, I am a professor at AUB and I have a degree in agriculture, and I am unable to get varieties that are true to type or adapted to the land that I am working on. This entire issue is extremely difficult. And I am talking here about working with one of the three big agricultural companies which should be trustworthy in this respect. Other farmers have the same problem. When it comes to the selection of varieties, you know, this is extremely difficult unless you are a very big farmer who's willing to invest time and money and have their own you know, engineers. In terms of the cost of the production, not only the financial cost, but more importantly, the social cost. So the way we have to, the way where farmers are, especially medium or small farmers, are driven into exploiting farm workers in order to make the cut. This is something that never enters into our calculations. Neither does the impact of what we do on natural resources, water, for example. We're very happy to talk about exporting, but we don't take into account at all anywhere that we're exporting a large quantity of water. So there are a lot of issues that need. And when it comes to the animal sector, and I know that's not in here, I mean, that is absolutely dramatic. The entire support system for veterinary and feed and others is completely non-existent. Losses are tremendous in the farms and in my farm in particular. As a matter of fact, I hold my post at AUB so that I can continue subsidizing agriculture, my agriculture specifically. So please, these are sense as a farmer.
Mr. Sinno, you have 30. 30 seconds to make a final intervention, and then we need to wrap up as we're past time.
Dr. Zurayk laid the rationale for developing this breeding and laboratory work at universities specifically for producing, hybrid seeds and new varieties, etc., that adaptable to our environment. This particular area, as far as academia is concerned, has been completely neglected, whereas in other, regional, countries around us, has been given like top priority, and has been the result of cooperation between faculties of agriculture, engineering, biology, chemistry, even social sciences, etc., particularly going into the breeding area. Animal breeding, seedlings, this kind of laboratory technology, which is remarkably important. Israel has done tremendously well in this particular area, and this is one of the ways in which they compete. They own they own the laboratory. They invest a lot in the labs, and the universities has taken upon themselves, to be leaders in producing seeds and new, adaptable seeds and even pesticides, to the Israeli conditions, in back there. So I think this has been
okay.
in Lebanon, and it's the main focuses that we, at our major universities here in Lebanon.
Thank you, Mr. Sinno. With that, I'm going to have to pass it back to Mohtar. I do want to just say thank you very much for everyone posed a question in the chat box or on YouTube. We've been overwhelmed with questions. My sincere apologies that we can't get to everyone. We will try and bookmark those if there's a way to respond to those substantively at a future time. Dean Mohtar, I pass it back to you for closing.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you all. In fact, I apologize for having to stop the seminar now, 15 minutes past due, because of time constraint that many of us have. I promise you two things. I'm not going to summarize. I plan to summarize, but it's been overwhelming, the feedback that we received. But I do promise you that we will send you a summary of the discussion. What I'd like to do is to highlight very, very high-level points that have been raised that I'd like all of us to follow up on. And I promise you that we will have another session focused on animal agriculture. I think this session is extremely important. And I also promise that we'll continue to convene these discussions beyond the session that we have today. The things that I'd like to bring up to our attention is something that was brought up early in the seminar, which is what are the resilient capacity factors that allow us to really be more resilient. I think we have identified some. That discussion needs to continue. Until we have a functioning public sector, I think the private sector and the academia need to work together to really look into past this hump that we have, the setback that we have in the economic crisis, in the post-COVID and in the post-blast. We need to recover, we need to reconvene and see what are these resilient capacity factors that we need to focus on. There was some that have been highlighted to overcome the currency, the financial issues that have been highlighted, the policy, but been very important factor that was highlighted in different forms and shape, which is the quality control. We at AUB are ready. We have established a laboratory that can help with some testing that allow us to really recover from that setback when it comes to a quality control, product control, in olive oil, in honey, in pesticide testing, and many others. We have listened to many challenges. We have listened to many opportunities, but something striking to me that I'd like to really dwell a little bit more is on the impact of the geopolitics. Some of us feel that it has and it will have a significant impact. Some feel differently. I really would like to see that it doesn't really impact us. It's one of the many challenges that we face. This is something needs to be looked at. And the farmer's voice. I do promise you also the next time we convene these meetings, we'll have a farmer's voice. that will allow us to really look at this complete circle of activities. Next step, again, we will summarize, we'll send you the summary, but I'd like us to keep this a living document. Maybe we'll establish a Google Doc that will keep these ideas flowing, and we'll come up with a policy paper that we can discuss with the policymakers, with decision makers when they are ready to receive us. Again, thank you. Doors are open to engage with the private sector, to engage with farming community, and allow for further discussions on this very, very critical topic. Thank you again for being patient with us. Very engaging, very rich discussion. Thank you all for the organizers. Special thank to Rachel for doing a fantastic job moderating this session. Thank you again. Happy holidays. Have a good break. Take a deep breath. We need all of our energy for the upcoming challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much.